Ella Morgan stepped onto the polished floors of the West Ridge Shooting Academy, with her worn leather messenger bag slung across her shoulder. Her pastel blue cardigan hung loose over a simple white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a soft braid, adorned with a small daisy clip. At 28, she looked nothing like the intense competitors who stalked the facility in their tactical gear and sponsorship patches. She hadn't fired competitively in 5 years, not since the day she'd packed away her custom rifle and walked away from the only world she'd ever truly dominated. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Today she was here as a guest, accompanying her cousin Jackson Wells, a rising shooting instructor who wanted to show her the recent renovations. West Ridge wasn't just any shooting range. It was an elite training ground where the sons and daughters of champions, weapons manufacturers, and wealthy enthusiasts came to perfect their craft. Every detail screamed prestige and fierce competition. State-of-the-art electronic target systems, private shooting bays with personal coaches, and simulation rooms equipped with military-grade training software. The competitors wore gear that cost more than most people's cars. Their rifles were custom-built by master gunsmiths, and their attitudes matched their investment portfolios. This was where reputations were forged, where sponsorships were secured, and where the next generation of shooting stars announced themselves to the world. Ella carried only a small notebook and a bottle of water. She walked with quiet humility, her eyes unconsciously scanning the facility, noting stance variations, grip techniques, and breathing patterns. Old habits die hard. The stares began immediately. A competitor leaning against the locker room entrance pushed his shooting glasses up and smirked. Lost bird watcher or someone's girlfriend. He said, loud enough for his group to hear. A woman, in full competition attire, whispered to her training partners, "She's not even carrying a case. What's she doing here?" The looks weren't curious. They were dismissive, calculated, cold. To them, Ella was insignificant, unranked, unworthy of acknowledgement. Ella didn't speak or explain herself. She simply stood near the observation area, quiet and composed, watching. And the academy kept watching her back, judging her, measuring her, and eventually underestimating her. They had no idea that the woman they saw as an outsider was about to become the most important name any of them would remember. The mockery intensified as the morning progressed. Ella positioned herself near the precision rifle range, her simple flats planted firmly on the gleaming floor, but she remained still, observing the calculated movements of elite training at the firing line. At the center position, Victoria Harlow commanded attention effortlessly. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her custom shooting jacket bore the logos of her numerous sponsors. She was everything West Ridge represented, connected, confident, and completely convinced of her own superiority. Victoria hadn't noticed Ella initially, but when she did, a smirk formed instantly. She turned to her cluster of admirers, her voice carrying deliberately. "Did someone misplace their kindergarten teacher? I think she took a wrong turn. This is a shooting range, not a flower arrangement class." The laughter was immediate and cruel. A competitor wearing a championship patch chimed in. "Maybe she's researching for a peace rally. Hope she doesn't faint at the sound of gunfire." Ella's expression never changed. She'd weathered worse storms than petty mockery, but something cold settled in her chest as Victoria approached, her competition boots clicking sharply on the polished floor. "You lost, sweetheart?" Victoria's tone sharpened. "This isn't a public tour. You need credentials to stand here." Ella's gaze remained steady, unflinching. Victoria's eyes traveled down to the leather messenger bag. No team logo, no equipment. Just worn leather and practical design. "That's adorable." Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to mock intimacy. "Let me guess, tagging along with your brother. Trying to overcome your fear of loud noises? A few coaches nearby exchanged glances but said nothing. One junior staff member even chuckled quietly, emboldening Victoria further. Without hesitation, Victoria reached for a cleaning cloth from her kit and dropped it at Ella's feet. "Here, make yourself useful. At least pretend you belong." The range erupted in laughter. Someone clapped. Another whistled. A competitor pantomimed, trembling hands, and whispered loudly, "Careful with the loud bangs, they might scare the little lady." Ella didn't even flinch. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was unsettling. It absorbed their mockery like a sponge, giving nothing back, revealing nothing. But behind those calm eyes, Ella was cataloging everything. The sloppy trigger discipline disguised as confidence, the tendency to rush shots for show, the complete misunderstanding of true marksmanship disguised as elite training. She'd seen real shooters, real concentration, real excellence. This wasn't it. The humiliation escalated as Ella's silence only fueled their boldness. What had started as casual mockery was evolving into something crueler, more targeted. A tall competitor approached with his phone raised, recording. "Tell us your name," he said mockingly. "We want to remember who got escorted out today." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria nodded toward the management office. "Let's speed this up. Someone should call security. Isn't this a violation?" Across the range, a uniformed staff member began walking over. His name tag read Mendoza, and his expression was stern. He didn't ask questions or investigate. He simply pointed. "This section is for registered competitors and authorized coaches only," he announced firmly. "Please return to the general waiting area." Ella looked at him for just a second, then nodded. She turned slowly and began walking away, her quiet footsteps barely audible against the background of distant shots. The range buzzed with triumph. "She actually left," someone whispered. Another competitor snorted. "I guess even tourists know when they're not wanted." But then director Catherine Reynolds appeared, a woman whose reputation preceded her and whose presence commanded instant respect. At 50, she'd trained Olympic champions and military elites, and her word was practically law in competitive shooting. "Circles. Ma'am," her voice cut through the laughter like a blade. "This facility operates under strict authorization protocols. You are not listed on today's access roster." Ella turned to face her, meeting her gaze with that same unshakable calm. She didn't defend herself or look surprised. She simply stood there, her soft cardigan a stark contrast to the tactical gear surrounding her. Victoria stepped forward, practically glowing with vindication. She already caused a scene. She ignored protocol and lingered where she shouldn't have. "That's a violation, right, Director?" Several competitors had their phones out now, capturing what they saw as victory. One whispered, "This is gold," posting this with the caption, "Softy gets reality check." Reynolds' expression remained neutral, but her tone turned sharper. "You need to leave the restricted area immediately." Ella didn't flinch. She adjusted her messenger bag strap and said quietly, "I understand." Victoria gave a theatrical wave. "Exits that way, sweetheart. Thanks for visiting Westridge. Please leave a review about how scary the big bad guns were." The laughter spread like wildfire, mock applause, sarcastic salutes, slow clapping as Ella began her walk to the exit. But something had shifted. A few competitors lowered their phones mid-recording, their brows furrowed. The mood wasn't entirely triumphant anymore. There was something unsettling about Ella's composure, her complete lack of defensive behavior. Who walks away that calmly from public humiliation? Who absorbs that much mockery without a single word of protest? As Ella disappeared through the tinted glass doors, a strange quiet settled over parts of the range, not enough to stop the celebration. but enough to plant seeds of doubt. They should have paid attention to that doubt. The atmosphere at West Ridge Shooting Academy shifted dramatically just after lunch. Without warning, the announcement system crackled to life, Director Reynolds' voice echoing across every speaker. Attention all competitors. The annual West Ridge Invitational Challenge is now officially open. All registered participants report to the main range for immediate qualification rounds. This year's format: precision under pressure. The facility erupted into motion. Competitors scrambled to collect their equipment, coaches reviewed last minute notes, and the atmosphere crackled with nervous energy. Each shooter had 15 minutes to prepare for what was known as the most unpredictable shooting competition in the country, a test that had broken even seasoned champions. Victoria Harlow was assigned as the first shooter, her voice cutting through the main range with clipped authority as she directed her support team. Chronograph readings, wind flags, distance markers. Check everything twice. But within minutes of the competition beginning, everything was falling apart for the supposed elite shooters. The targets were placed at unusual angles. The lighting had been adjusted to create deceptive shadows. The standard distances had been modified just enough to throw off muscle memory. One by one, the competitors stepped up to the firing line, and one by one, they faltered. Victoria's first round was a disaster, 3 shots completely off target, 2 more barely catching the outer rings. Her second attempt wasn't much better. Across the range, champions with walls full of trophies were shooting like first-timers. Confusion spread quickly. Competitors shouted at their coaches, blame flying in every direction. Equipment was checked and rechecked. Excuses multiplied. Victoria stood at the center of it all, breathing hard, her perfect ponytail coming loose. Her sponsored jacket suddenly seeming like a costume rather than a badge of honor. There must be something wrong with the targets, she insisted loudly, or the lighting. This isn't normal. That's when a voice cut through the chaos, clear and confident. The challenge isn't the targets. It's the pressure you're putting on yourselves. Heads turned to see Ella standing near the entrance, still in her pastel cardigan, still carrying nothing but her small messenger bag. Director Reynolds was beside her, an inscrutable expression on her face. Ms. Morgan has agreed to demonstrate the course, Reynolds announced, her voice neutral but carrying an undercurrent that silenced the room. Victoria's laugh was immediate and sharp. Her? Is this a joke? A competitor near the equipment table asked loudly, who gave the kindergarten teacher permission to handle firearms? Ella didn't respond to the comments. She simply stepped forward, approaching the rangemaster with quiet confidence. He handed her a standard-issue competition rifle, nothing custom, nothing special. She took it with practiced ease, checked the chamber with swift efficiency, and stepped up to the firing position. The room fell silent, all eyes on this unlikely scenario. Someone snickered, another whispered a joke. But Ella didn't seem to hear any of it. She settled into position with a fluidity that caught a few of the more observant coaches by surprise. Her breathing slowed visibly, her posture shifted subtly. And in that moment, something in the room changed. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Without hesitation, without bravado, Ella fired 5 shots in such rapid succession that they almost sounded like one continuous report. The rangemaster hit the target recall button. As the paper target slid forward toward the firing line, the silence in the room deepened to something approaching reverence. 5 shots, 1 ragged hole, dead center, perfect score. Perfect grouping, impossible accuracy. Before anyone could react, Ella handed the rifle back to the stunned rangemaster, stepped to the next station, and repeated the performance with a different firearm, then another, and another. For the next 5 minutes, Ella Morgan demonstrated a level of marksmanship that none of them had ever witnessed in person. Every stance flawless, every shot perfect. Every movement economical and precise. No wasted energy, no dramatic flair. Just pure, undiluted excellence. The truth begins to emerge as stunned silence blanketed the West Ridge Shooting Academy. Director. Reynolds stepped forward, clearing her throat. For those who don't recognize our guest, she began, her voice carrying across the still room. Allow me to introduce Ella Morgan, former captain of the United States International Shooting Team. 3-time world champion and holder of 6 world records that remain unbroken to this day. The reaction was immediate. Heads turned. Some gasped. Others stared in disbelief. This was the same woman they'd mocked hours earlier, the softy they'd driven from the range. Reynolds studied the crowd intently. Ms. Morgan retired from competitive shooting 5 years ago at the peak of her career. She now runs one of the most successful youth marksmanship education programs in the country, focusing on discipline, focus, and respect, the very fundamentals that seem to be lacking here today. The range went dead silent. No shuffling. Number. Whispers. Nothing. I stepped away after achieving what I'd set out to do, Ella said, her voice soft but carrying easily in the silence. Including teaching at the Olympic Training Center and developing programs for military specialist training. A coach near the back took a slow, shaky breath. A competitor lowered her gaze, suddenly unable to meet Ella's eyes. I didn't come here to compete, Ella continued, looking around the range. I came to observe the next generation of shooters. But when I saw how performance was being sacrificed for showmanship, I agreed to Director Reynolds' request for a demonstration. Simple, honest, undeniable. That's when they heard it, the distinctive sound of the main doors opening, followed by the quiet murmur of recognition spreading through the crowd. Stepping into view came James Harrington, founder of Precision Sport International, the largest manufacturer of competition shooting equipment in the world, and the most influential figure in competitive marksmanship. The competitors stared. The coaches straightened. Harrington walked past the line of stunned shooters, heading straight toward Ella with singular purpose. He stopped 3 feet from her and did something that shattered every assumption in the room. He extended his hand with a warm smile. Ella, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's been too long. Ella shook his hand without hesitation, a small smile softening her features. Hello, James. Gasps rippled through the range like electricity. Victoria Harlow shrank back, her face pale with shock. Harrington turned to address the room, his voice carrying easily without being raised. Earlier today, I received multiple calls about behavior at this facility. Reports of targeted harassment, public humiliation, and disrespect directed at a guest. He paused, his gaze sweeping the silent crowd. A woman, a former champion, a living legend in our sport. Another pause. And my former protege. The reckoning was swift and devastating. The range went tomb silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the polished floor. Harrington continued, his voice steady but carrying an edge that made everyone stand straighter. You mocked her gentle demeanor. You questioned her right to stand where you stood. You filmed her humiliation for your entertainment. His gaze found Victoria in the crowd. She tried to shrink back further, but there was nowhere to hide. But while you were laughing, Harrington said, she was observing. While you were failing, she demonstrated what real mastery looks like. While you proved you couldn't handle the simplest pressure situation, she showed what true mental discipline looks like. He turned to Director Reynolds. I want a full investigation. Names, footage, witness statements. Anyone involved in the harassment will face immediate disqualification from all PSI-sponsored events for the remainder of the season. Victoria stepped forward desperately. Mr. Harrington, Harrington raised his hand, cutting her off. You lost control of yourself. You failed to maintain the composure expected of a sponsored athlete, And you stood by while a respected professional was publicly degraded. His voice didn't rise, but it filled every corner of the range. Miss Harlow, your sponsorship contract is under immediate review. Your family connections won't help you here. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. Her perfect ponytail suddenly looked disheveled, her confidence completely evaporated. Harrington faced the room again. This facility is supposed to train champions. Real champions don't lead through intimidation or expensive equipment. They excel through discipline, through earning respect, through proving themselves under pressure. He looked back at Ella, who had remained perfectly composed throughout the entire confrontation. She didn't ask for recognition today. She demonstrated it when given the opportunity. She showed excellence because that's what true champions do. They perform even when no one believes in them. Director Reynolds spoke up, her voice firm. All competition rankings will be reviewed. Training access will be suspended for those involved. Sponsorship evaluations will be delayed pending investigation. The competitor who had dropped the cleaning cloth at Ella's feet sat down heavily, his hands shaking. The one who'd filmed her exit had already deleted the video from his phone. Across the range, a coach removed her headset, unable to look anyone in the eye. Ella simply stood there, not triumphant, not smug, just steady. She'd been through real competitions, real pressure. This was just another day to her. Harrington turned to her one more time. The national team has been asking about you, he said. Quietly, they could use your guidance again. Ella shook her head with a faint smile. I'm done with competition, James. My students need me now. I just came to see how things have changed. He nodded once, understanding completely. Outside, the day continued as normal. Inside the range, for the first time all day, no one questioned who belonged and who didn't. As the crowd began to disperse, the full weight of what had happened settled over West Ridge Shooting Academy like a heavy blanket. Word spread quickly through the locker rooms, the cafeteria, every corner of the facility. The woman they'd mocked wasn't just a former competitor. She was mentored by the most powerful figure in the industry. The gentle soul they tried to humiliate had more championship titles than their entire group combined. Ella gathered her simple messenger bag, preparing to leave when several young shooters approached. Not the ones who had mocked her, they had scattered like leaves in the wind, but others who had watched the whole thing unfold with growing unease. Ma'am, one young female shooter said quietly, I wanted to apologize. Not everyone here agreed with what happened to you. Ella looked at her, really looked. She saw something in the girl's eyes that reminded her of herself when she first started competing. What's your name? Zoe Chun, ma'am. I'm here on scholarship, not family connections. Ella nodded. There are good people here, Zoe. Don't let today make you think otherwise. But remember, real strength doesn't need to announce itself with cruelty or boasting. A few more young competitors gathered, asking quiet questions about mental focus, about breathing techniques, about what it really meant to be a champion. Ella answered each one thoughtfully, her voice gentle but authoritative. Director Reynolds approached as the informal gathering wound down. She held out a business card. Guest instructor position, she said. 1 semester. These shooters could learn something valuable from you. Ella took the card, but didn't immediately respond. They need to learn how to listen first, she said. How to respect people regardless of how they present themselves or where they come from. Would you be willing to teach them that? Ella looked around the facility one more time, at the expensive equipment, the polished surfaces, the privilege that coated everything like a glossy finish. Then she looked at the few young competitors still standing nearby, the ones with genuine curiosity in their eyes instead of entitled smugness. I'll consider it, she said finally. Later that evening, Victoria Harlow packed her competition gear. In her luxury SUV, her sponsorship review meant immediate uncertainty for her career. Her father's frantic phone calls had gone unanswered by the PSI board. She found herself thinking about Ella's silence, her composure, the way she'd commanded respect without demanding it. Everything Victoria had been taught about success and influence had crumbled in a single afternoon. As the sun set over West Ridge Shooting Academy, Ella walked toward the parking lot where Jackson was waiting by their modest sedan. Her simple flats brushed the concrete path. Her messenger bag shifted on her shoulder. Behind her she could feel eyes watching, not with mockery this time, but with something approaching understanding. Some of them were finally beginning to learn what she'd known all along. You don't need to be intimidating to be respected. You just need to be excellent. 3 weeks later, Ella Morgan returned to West Ridge Shooting Academy. This time, she wore a simple navy blazer over her white shirt, still understated but carrying herself with the quiet authority that had always been there. The transformation in the academy was remarkable. Word of the incident had spread through shooting circles like wildfire. Suddenly, West Ridge's reputation for producing entitled competitors had become a liability rather than a selling point. New protocols were in place. Respect and merit-based evaluation replaced the old system of family connections and financial privilege. Several competitors had been suspended, others were on probation, and the entire culture was shifting. Ella's first class was small, 12 young shooters who had specifically requested to learn from her. Zoe Chun was there, along with others who had shown genuine interest in becoming real champions rather than playing at being elite shooters. Excellence, she began, standing in front of a simple whiteboard in a basic classroom, isn't about the loudest voice in the room. It's not about the most expensive equipment or the most impressive family name. She wrote 3 words on the board: focus, discipline, humility. Real champions focus more than they boast. They practice when no one is watching. They understand that respect is earned through consistent excellence and character, not demanded through intimidation or privilege. One student raised his hand. "Man, how do you stay so calm under pressure?" Ella smiled slightly. "I've learned that aggression is often just insecurity wearing a disguise. When you know who you are and what you're capable of, other people's opinions become background noise." After the class, Director Reynolds found her in the hallway. "Early reports are promising," she said. "The students who are staying seem different, more focused." "Good," Ella replied. "They're learning that being a champion isn't about looking the part, it's about being worthy of the title." As she walked across the facility toward her car, Ella noticed the changes everywhere. Competitors working together, regardless of their backgrounds. Coaches focusing on skill development rather than social connections. The expensive equipment was still there, but it no longer seemed to define anyone's worth. Near the exit, she passed a group of new arrivals going through basic orientation. They looked nervous, excited, unsure of themselves, the way young shooters should look before they learn what they're truly capable of. One of them, a young woman about the same age Ella had been when she first started competing internationally, caught her eye. There was something familiar in her expression, a determination to prove herself, to excel through merit rather than intimidation. Ella nodded to her as she passed. The young woman straightened unconsciously, sensing something significant in that simple gesture of acknowledgement. Getting into her car, Ella reflected on how strange life could be. She'd come to West Ridge as an observer, ended up as a teacher, and somehow found a new purpose in the process. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Proud of you. You're changing the culture over there." She typed back, "Just teaching them what you taught me years ago, that true excellence doesn't need to announce itself." As she drove away from West Ridge for the day, Ella Morgan, former champion, current mentor, and forever an example of quiet excellence, smiled to herself. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be yourself, stand your ground, and let your actions speak louder than anyone else's words." The young woman at the entrance was still watching Ella's car disappear down the road, something stirring in her chest that felt like possibility, like potential, like the beginning of understanding what it really meant to be a champion. And Ella knew that the real victory wasn't in the humiliation of those who had mocked her. It was in the inspiration of those who would carry forward the lessons of true excellence, true discipline, and true strength. The confrontation was over, but the teaching had just begun. Zoe Chun watched from the sidelines as Ella prepared for the day's training session. The young competitor had arrived an hour early, eager to absorb every moment of wisdom from her new mentor. In just 3 weeks, Ella's presence had transformed West Ridge Academy from a showcase of egos to a temple of discipline. Today's lesson would focus on breath control, and the small class of 12 selected students waited with unprecedented humility. "The gentlest touch often yields the most precise results," Ella explained, setting up the demonstration targets. "Many confuse aggression with accuracy. They are not the same." Victoria Harlow observed from the doorway, uninvited but unable to stay away. Her sponsorship remained under review, her future uncertain. She'd lost 15 pounds since the incident, her customary confidence replaced by a haunted expression. The humiliation had been complete, but something beyond shame kept drawing her back to watch Ella teach. "Miss Morgan," Victoria finally called out, her voice lacking its former edge. "May I speak with you privately?" The room fell silent. Students exchanged glances, wondering how their gentle instructor would handle the confrontation with her former tormentor. Ella simply nodded. "Class, practice your breathing sequences. I'll return shortly." In the quiet of the equipment room, Victoria struggled to maintain eye contact. "I've been trying to replicate your technique," she admitted. "I can't match your groupings no matter what I do." Ella studied her carefully. "Because you're trying to prove something with each shot. Let go of proving. Focus on being. I don't understand. When you pulled that cleaning cloth stunt, what were you trying to accomplish?" Victoria flinched at the memory. "To establish dominance, I guess. To show everyone I was in charge." "And how much mental energy did that require?" "Energy that should have gone into your shooting." The realization dawned slowly across Victoria's face. "I've been wasting my focus on the wrong targets." Ella nodded. "Precisely. Will you teach me?" Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not in the class. I don't deserve that. But maybe after hours?" The request hung in the air. Between them, Ella had every reason to refuse, to savor the justice of Victoria's downfall. Instead, she smiled gently. "Tomorrow, 6 a.m., before anyone else arrives." Victoria blinked back unexpected tears. "Why would you help me after what I did?" "Because true mastery isn't about holding grudges," Ella replied. "It's about elevating everyone around you, even those who once tried to diminish you." As Victoria turned to leave, Director Reynolds appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. "Ella, there's someone here you should meet." Following Reynolds to the administrative office, Ella found herself face to face with a tall woman in a crisp military uniform. The visitor stood with perfect posture, her expression unreadable. "Captain Morgan," the woman said, offering a firm handshake. "Colonel Michelle Harris, United States Army Marksmanship Unit. Your reputation precedes you." "Former captain." Ella gently. "I left competitive shooting years ago." Colonel Harris nodded. "So I've heard. But circumstances change. We have a situation that requires your particular expertise." Director Reynolds excused herself, leaving them alone in the office. "The International Military Games are being held in 3 months, Colonel Harris explained. "For the first time in 12 years, the United States is hosting. Our team was on track for gold until our lead precision shooter suffered a training accident last week." Ella listened silently, already anticipating where this conversation was heading. "We need you, Captain Morgan." Not just as a shooter, but as our team lead. I'm retired, Ella said simply. There are plenty of qualified shooters still active. Colonel Harris leaned forward. Not with your experience. Not with your psychological profile. This isn't just about hitting targets, Captain. It's about leading a team under unprecedented pressure. Foreign military delegations watching your every move. National pride on the line. I teach now, Ella protested. My students need me. And your country needs you, Colonel Harris countered. Just for 3 months. Train with us, compete in the games, then return to your students with new wisdom to share. Ella stared out the window at the training range where her small class waited. I walked away for good reasons. Because you achieved everything you set out to do, Colonel Harris said. But this is something you've never done before. Leading a military team on home soil, representing your country one last time. The colonel slid a folder across the desk. Review the details. We need your answer by tomorrow. After the colonel departed, Ella returned to her class, the folder tucked discreetly in her bag. She moved through the lesson with her characteristic focus, but her mind kept drifting to the proposal. Later that evening, as she sat alone in her modest apartment, Ella opened the folder. Inside were personnel files on the current team members, facility specifications, and a training schedule that would demand every ounce of her expertise. Her phone buzzed with a text from James Harrington. Heard Harris approached you. They need you, Ella. More importantly, you might need this. Ella sighed, setting down the phone. The shooting world was smaller than most people realized. Nothing stayed secret for long. She pulled out an old wooden box from her closet, unlocking it with a key she still wore around her neck. Inside lay her competition journal, filled with notes from her championship years. Between the pages was a photograph. A younger Ella surrounded by her international team, all of them beaming with gold medals around their necks. She traced the faces with her fingertip, remembering the discipline, the focus, the bond that comes only from shared struggle and triumph. One last time, she whispered to herself. The following morning, Victoria arrived at exactly 5:55 a.m. to find Ella already at the range, methodically setting up targets. I wasn't sure you'd come, Ella said without looking up. I wasn't sure you'd be here, Victoria replied, setting down her equipment bag. Ella turned, her expression unusually serious. I need to tell you something. After today, I'll be taking a 3-month leave of absence. Victoria's face fell. You're leaving? Because of me? No, Ella smiled. I've been asked to lead the U.S. team for the International Military Games. The military games? Victoria's eyes widened. That's incredible. They're being held here this year, aren't they? Ella nodded. Which means I'll need someone to continue working with my students while I'm training with the team. Victoria stared in disbelief. You can't possibly mean. I do, Ella interrupted. You have the technical skills. What you need to develop is the patience, the humility to teach others. I believe this assignment will benefit both you and my students. They hate me, Victoria said bluntly. After what happened, they'll never accept me as an instructor. Then you'll have to earn their respect, Ella replied. Just as I had to earn yours. The challenge hung between them, impossible yet unavoidable. How do I start? Victoria finally asked. Ella handed her a notebook. With this, my teaching journal. Every technique, every mental exercise, every approach I've developed for different learning styles. Study it. Become it. Victoria accepted the notebook with trembling hands. I don't deserve this chance. This isn't about deserving, Ella said quietly. It's about growing. Now let's begin with your breathing. You're still forcing it. For the next hour, Ella dismantled and rebuilt Victoria's technique, correcting years of ingrained habits with gentle persistence. By the time the rest of the academy began stirring to life, Victoria had experienced the most transformative shooting lesson of her career. "Same time tomorrow," Ella said as they packed up. "And Victoria? Wear something comfortable. No logos, no sponsors. Just you and the fundamentals." Victoria nodded, a new humility in her expression. "Thank you, Ella. I won't let you down." "No," Ella agreed. "I don't believe you will." 2 weeks later, Ella stood before her class for the final session before her departure. The students had taken the news of her temporary absence with mixed emotions: pride that their instructor had been selected for such an honor, concern about continuing their training without her guidance. "I have an announcement about who will be working with you during my absence," Ella began, watching their expectant faces. "I've selected someone with exceptional technical skills who's on a journey to develop their teaching abilities." The door opened, and Victoria entered quietly, wearing a simple gray shirt and black pants. No logos, no flash, nothing like her former self. The reaction was immediate. Zoe Chun stood up, her expression thunderous. "This is a joke, right? After what she did to you?" Other students murmured in agreement, their faces reflecting betrayal and confusion. Ella raised her hand for silence. "The most important lesson I can teach you isn't about trigger control or sight alignment. It's about transformation. Victoria has begun that journey, just as each of you has. She has technical mastery to share, and you have much to teach her. About respect and teamwork." Victoria stepped forward, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. "I don't expect your forgiveness or your trust. I haven't earned either. But I promise to honor Miss Morgan's teaching methods and to learn alongside you." Zoe remained standing, unconvinced. "Why her? Why not one of the other coaches?" "Because," Ella said quietly, "sometimes the person who needs the lesson most is the one who should eventually teach it." The room fell silent as the wisdom of this approach slowly penetrated. "I'll be checking in regularly," Ella assured them. "And Director Reynolds will be overseeing all training sessions. This is as much a test for Victoria as it is a continuation of your education." Slowly, reluctantly, Zoe returned to her seat. The other students exchanged uncertain glances, but no one else protested. "Now," Ella continued, "let's make the most of our final session together." The class proceeded with an intensity born of their impending separation. Each student worked with renewed focus, absorbing Ella's guidance as if storing it up for the lean months ahead. After class, Zoe approached Ella privately. "I don't understand how you can trust her." Ella considered the young shooter thoughtfully. "Trust isn't always given based on past actions. Sometimes it's extended as a path toward future growth." "She humiliated you in front of everyone," Zoe persisted. "And now she has the opportunity to humble herself before the same audience," Ella replied. "Which do you think requires more courage?" Zoe had no answer for that. "Watch her closely," Ella advised. "Not for mistakes to criticize, but for progress to acknowledge. That's your assignment while I'm gone." The following Monday, Ella reported to the Fort Benning training facility, temporary home of the U.S. military games team. Colonel Harris greeted her at the gate, along with 6 shooters in military uniform, 3 men and 3 women, all standing at attention. "Team, this is Captain Ella Morgan," Harris announced. "Former 3-time world champion and your new team leader for precision events." A tall sergeant with a weathered face stepped forward. "Sergeant Miller, ma'am. We've studied your competition videos. It's an honor." Ella nodded acknowledgement. "The honor is mine, Sergeant. I look forward to working with all of you." Colonel Harris led them to the specialized range where they would spend most of their waking hours for the next 12 weeks. The Chinese team has taken gold in precision shooting for the last 3 games. The Russians have invested heavily in new training technology. The Germans have their youngest team ever, but they're hungry. "And we have home field advantage," Ella observed, studying the range layout. "For whatever that's worth," Harris agreed. brings its own pressure. Ella set down her bag and turned. To face the team, I'd like to see each of you shoot. Not your best, most careful shots. I want to see how you perform when you're tired, rushed, distracted. One of the female specialists raised an eyebrow. You want to see us at our worst. Ma'am, I want to see you under pressure, Ella clarified. Because that's what we'll face during the games. For the next 2 hours, Ella pushed the team through increasingly difficult scenarios, timed sequences, position changes, environmental distractions. She observed silently, making notes in a small book. Finally, she called them together. You're all exceptional shooters. Sergeant Miller frowned. With respect, ma'am, we've all qualified through rigorous trials. And you'll all fail under international pressure if we don't address the mental game, Ella replied calmly. I watched each of you today. When you missed a shot, your next 3 shots suffered while you mentally replayed the miss. That's a luxury we cannot afford. The team exchanged glances, uncomfortable with her assessment, but unable to deny its accuracy. Tomorrow we begin with meditation, Ella announced. 6 a.m., civilian clothes, no ranks, no titles. Meditation? One of the corporals scoffed. We're soldiers, not yogis. Ella fixed him with a steady gaze. Corporal Evans, you're breathing. Pattern changes dramatically after a missed shot. Your shoulder tension increases by approximately 30%. Both are correctable with proper mental training. Evans blinked in surprise at her precise observation. We have 12 weeks. Ella continued. We'll spend the first 4 rebuilding your mental approach. The middle 4 perfecting technical execution. The final 4 simulating competition conditions. Any questions? There were none. Dismissed until tomorrow. As the team dispersed, Colonel Harris approached. That's not the standard military approach. If you wanted the standard approach, you wouldn't have recruited a civilian, Ella pointed out. Harris smiled slightly. Fair enough, Captain. Carry on. That evening, Ella called Director Reynolds to check on her class. How did the first session go? Tense, Reynolds admitted. Victoria was nervous. The students were skeptical. But she stuck to your lesson plan, and no one walked out. I'd call that a qualified success. And Zoe? Watching Victoria like a hawk, challenged her twice on technique demonstrations. Victoria handled it well, acknowledged one correction. As valid, demonstrated why the other wasn't applicable to that particular scenario. Ella smiled. Progress. The military team is lucky to have you, Reynolds said. Will you come observe Victoria's class when you can? Not yet, Ella replied. She needs space to find her own teaching voice without feeling my shadow over her shoulder. Trust the process, Catherine. After hanging up, Ella unpacked in her temporary quarters on base. The Spartan room suited her minimalist preferences. She arranged her few personal items, a small plant, a framed photo of her parents, and a worn copy of The Inner Game of Tennis, a book that had shaped her approach to mental conditioning. From her window, she could see the illuminated range, where tomorrow she would begin reshaping 6 skilled shooters into a cohesive, mentally unshakable team. The challenge energized her in a way she hadn't felt since her competition days. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. First class complete. Terrifying. Humbling. Thank you for this opportunity. Ella replied simply, remember, they're watching how you handle difficulty more than how you demonstrate perfection. Across town, Victoria sat alone in her apartment. Ella's teaching journal opened before her, making notes for tomorrow's class. The designer clothes that once filled her closet had been pushed aside for simpler attire. The walls once covered with competition photos and sponsor endorsements now held printouts of teaching methodologies and learning style assessments. Her phone rang, her father calling for the 3rd time that day. She let it go to voicemail. His demands that she fight the sponsorship review. That she leveraged family connections to restore her former status had become background noise. For the first time in her life, Victoria was discovering what it meant to earn something through humility rather than demand it through privilege. Meanwhile, Zoe Chun sat cross-legged on her bed, reviewing her notes from Victoria's first session. Despite her lingering resentment, Zoe had to admit that Victoria's technical knowledge was impressive. Her explanation of barrel harmonics had been clearer than anything Zoe had heard before. "Progress, not perfection," Zoe murmured, remembering one of Ella's favorite phrases. If Ella could see potential in Victoria, perhaps there was more too. Her former tormentor than Zoe had been willing to acknowledge. The next morning at exactly 6 a.m., Ella sat on the floor of the indoor range, 6 skeptical military shooters arranged in a semicircle before her. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Today we begin by learning to control the only thing we truly can, our own internal state." Corporal Evans shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I'm not sure how sitting on the floor helps us hit targets." Ella opened her eyes and regarded him calmly. "Corporal, when you competed in the divisional championships last year, you were leading until the final round. Then you missed 2 shots and dropped to 4th place. Would you like to tell the team what happened in your mind between those shots?" Evan's face flushed. "That's not in my file." "No," Ella agreed. "I watched the footage. Your body language changed completely after the first miss. You lost the medal before you fired the second shot." The corporal looked down, unable to dispute. Her assessment. "We're not here to become good at meditation," Ella explained to the team. "We're here to become masters of our focus, our breathing, our mental state under pressure. Now close your eyes and follow my instructions." For the next 30 minutes, Ella guided them through techniques she had developed over years of international competition, methods of clearing mental distractions, maintaining focus during environmental disruptions, and recovering instantly from mistakes. "Your body can execute perfect shots," she told them as they opened their eyes. "Your mind is what gets in the way. My job is to remove those obstacles." Sergeant Miller nodded slowly, a new respect in his eyes. "I've never approached it that way before." "Few do," Ella replied. "That's why few achieve their full potential." She stood, and the team rose with her. "Now we shoot. Just 10 rounds each. But between each shot, you'll use the recovery breathing technique we just practiced." The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. By the end of the session, their groupings had tightened, and more importantly, their recovery from poor shots had improved dramatically. "Same time tomorrow," Ella announced, "and every morning. This isn't optional. It's the foundation of everything else we'll build." As the team dispersed, Colonel Harris approached with a visitor, James Harrington. "Thought I'd check on my investment," Harrington said with a smile. "PSI is providing the competition rifles for the games." Ella embraced her old mentor. "They're a solid team, technically gifted. But," Harrington prompted, knowing her too well. "But they've been trained to shoot, not to win," Ella replied. "There's a difference," Harrington nodded. "That's why you're here. How's Victoria doing with your class?" "Taking her first steps. It's a long road from technical proficiency to teaching wisdom. Much like these soldiers have a long road. From shooting proficiency to championship mentality," Harrington observed. Ella smiled. "Exactly. Different context, same journey." As they walked toward the administrative building, Harrington grew serious. "The Chinese team arrived yesterday for early acclimation. Their lead shooter is Li Wei." Ella stopped walking. "Wei is here already? You remember him, I see." "From the Beijing World Cup," Ella said quietly. "He was the only competitor who ever matched my perfect score in finals." Harrington nodded. "He's been waiting for a rematch ever since you retired. When news broke that you were coaching our military team, the Chinese added him to their roster." "This just became personal, Ella." She absorbed this information silently, memories flooding back of the intense Beijing final. 8 hours of shooting that came down to a measurement of millimeters to determine the winner. He was a master technician, Ella acknowledged. And now he's their team leader, Harrington added. The media is already calling it the rematch of the century. The civilian coach versus the military champion. Ella sighed. I didn't return. For publicity or rivalries, I'm here to prepare this team. The preparation just got more complex, Harrington said gently. Wei will be bringing psychological warfare, not just marksmanship. Colonel Harris, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Should we be concerned? Ella considered this, then slowly shook her head. No, this changes nothing about our approach. If anything, it validates it. Wei is a mental competitor first, a shooter second. That's exactly what I'm building here. She turned to face the range where her team would soon return for afternoon training. Tell the media whatever you need to. My focus remains on these 6 shooters and what they need to succeed. Harrington smiled with approval. That's why you were the champion, Ella, and that's why you'll build champions now. The morning sunrise cast long shadows across Fort Bennett's precision range as Ella guided her team through their 4th week of training. What had begun as skepticism had evolved into determined focus. The 6 shooters moved with newfound awareness. Their breathing synchronized, their movements economical and precise. Transition drill, Ella called out, her voice calm but commanding. 3 positions, 10 seconds between signals. Sergeant Miller nodded, leading the team as they prepared. When the buzzer sounded, they dropped into prone position, fired 2 precisely placed shots, then seamlessly transitioned to kneeling as the 2nd buzzer rang. The entire sequence flowed like choreography, each shooter completely absorbed in their process. Final position, Ella announced, watching as they shifted to standing, the most challenging position in precision shooting. Corporal Evans, once the most resistant to Ella's methods, settled into his stance with remarkable stability. His breathing slowed visibly, his focus narrowing to the perfect alignment of sight and target. When he squeezed the trigger, the shot landed dead center. Time, Ella called. The team lowered their rifles in unison, their movements synchronized after weeks of training together. Results, she said, examining the electronic scoring system. 97% accuracy across all positions. That's an 8% improvement from last week. The team exchanged subtle glances of satisfaction, not celebration. Not yet, but acknowledgement of progress earned through relentless discipline. Sergeant Miller, your transition to standing is still causing a momentary alignment issue. Specialist Rodriguez, excellent breath control throughout. Corporal Evans. Ella paused, meeting his gaze directly. Your mental recovery between positions has transformed completely. Evans straightened, unable to hide his pride at her recognition. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me, Ella replied. This is your achievement, not mine. As the team broke for their mid-morning nutrition period, Colonel Harris approached with a tablet in hand. Chinese team held their qualification rounds yesterday. Thought you might want to see the results. Ella accepted the tablet, scanning the scores with careful neutrality. Li Wei's performance dominated the statistics, his scores nearly perfect. Across all categories. He's sending a message, Harris observed. He always did have a flair for psychological warfare, Ella agreed, handing back the tablet. But it won't work on us. You seem confident. Ella smiled slightly. I am. Because, unlike Wei, we're not aiming for perfect scores in practice. Harris raised an eyebrow. Come again? Wei is shooting to intimidate with practice scores. We're building resilience that scoring systems don't measure. Ella gestured toward her team, now gathered around a nutrition station, reviewing their performance videos on individual tablets. They're learning to perform regardless of conditions, pressure, or opponent tactics. That's what wins medals when perfect technique meets perfect pressure. The colonel studied Ella thoughtfully. You really did revolutionize mental preparation. In shooting sports, didn't you? I just applied what I learned through failure, Ella replied. My early career was built on technical perfection. It wasn't until I lost everything that I discovered the mental game is what separates good from unbeatable. Before Harris could respond, Ella's phone buzzed with an incoming video call. She excused herself and answered to find Director Reynolds. On the screen, "Catherine, is everything all right?" Reynolds' expression was a mixture of concern and admiration. "You need to see this. I'm sending footage from yesterday's training session." Moments later, a video began playing on Ella's phone. It showed Victoria Harlow working with Zoe Chun on an advanced stability technique. What caught Ella's attention wasn't the technical instruction but Victoria's approach, patient, encouraging, completely focused on Zoe's development rather than showcasing her own expertise. "She's completely transformed," Reynolds said. "The students have started requesting additional sessions with her, even Zoe, who was her biggest critic." Ella watched as Victoria adjusted Zoe's elbow position with gentle precision, her explanation clear and supportive. "She's finding her teaching voice." "It's more than that," Reynolds insisted. "She's finding purpose beyond competition." "The way you did. How are her own shooting skills progressing?" Reynolds smiled. "That's the other surprise. Her accuracy has improved by 12% since she started teaching. It's as if helping others see clearly has sharpened her own vision." "It often works that way," Ella acknowledged. "Teaching forces you to deconstruct your own understanding, to rebuild it in clearer terms." "Will you come observe a session soon? The students ask about you constantly." Ella glanced toward her team, now preparing to resume training. "Not yet. Send me weekly video updates." "Victoria needs to develop her confidence without feeling she's being evaluated against my methods." After ending the call, Ella rejoined her team with renewed focus. "This afternoon we're adding a new dimension to our training: environmental adaptation." She gestured toward the far end of the range where facility staff were setting up powerful fans, strobe lights, and a sound system. "International competition brings variables we can't control: changing light conditions, wind gusts through ventilation systems, crowd noise, photographer movements. Today we start preparing for all of it." Specialist Rodriguez frowned. "The regulation indoor range environment is standardized." "On paper, yes," Ella agreed. "In reality, every venue has its quirks. The Beijing arena had air conditioning that created microcurrents. The Rio facility had lighting that shifted as the day progressed. Adaptability is our advantage." For the next 3 hours, Ella subjected her team to increasingly challenging environmental distractions, first individually, then in combinations. With each new obstacle, she taught them specific techniques to maintain focus and execution. "Your body knows what to do," she reminded them repeatedly. "Your job is to create the mental space for it to perform, regardless of external conditions." By late afternoon, the team was exhausted but exhilarated. They had discovered capabilities they hadn't known they possessed: the ability to perform with precision even as lights flashed, sounds blared, and artificial wind gusts disrupted their stability. "That's enough for today," Ella announced, pleased with their progress. "Tomorrow she stopped mid-sentence as she noticed a small delegation entering the range. 3 men in military uniform, accompanied by a 4th in civilian attire, Li Wei, flanked by members of the Chinese shooting team. Colonel Harris quickly approached the visitors. "Gentlemen, this is a closed training session." The ranking Chinese officer bowed slightly. "Colonel, we apologize for the intrusion. We were scheduled to tour the facility this afternoon. Perhaps there was a miscommunication." Before Harris could respond, Li Wei stepped forward, his attention fixed solely on Ella. "Captain Morgan, it has been many years. Ella met his gaze with professional courtesy. Coach Wei, welcome to Fort Bennett. Not Coach, Wei corrected with a thin smile. Competitor. Like old times. The tension in the room shifted palpably. Ella's team moved closer, instinctively forming a protective formation around their leader. I see you are using unconventional methods, Wei observed, glancing at the environmental simulation equipment. Very creative. We each have our approach, Ella replied neutrally. Wei nodded, his expression revealing nothing. Indeed. I focus on perfection. Always perfection. No distractions, no excuses. He paused, his gaze intensifying. No failure. The subtle emphasis on the last word sent a chill through the room. It was a deliberate reference to Ella's final competition. Before retirement, the only major event where she had failed to medal after her equipment malfunction had disrupted her concentration. Sergeant Miller stepped forward, clearly reading. The psychological attack. Sir, we need to reset for our next training segment. Wei bowed slightly. Of course. We will continue our tour. Until the games, Captain Morgan. As the Chinese delegation departed, Ella maintained her composed expression. But her team could sense the impact of the encounter. That was deliberate, Corporal Evans said quietly. They're trying to get in our heads. Yes, Ella acknowledged. And that tells us something important. What's that, ma'am? Specialist Rodriguez asked. They're worried, Ella replied. A small smile forming. You don't deploy psychological tactics against opponents you don't fear. The team straightened with newfound confidence at this perspective. Clean up and get some rest, Ella instructed. Tomorrow we're adding another dimension to our training. Later that evening, as most of the base settled into night routines, Ella returned alone to the range. The encounter with Wei had stirred memories she'd long kept contained, not just of competitions and rivalries, but of her final professional failure and the painful decision to walk away. She set up a single lane, loaded a standard competition rifle, and took position. For several minutes, she simply stood there, reacquainting herself with the weight, the balance, the connection between body and instrument. I thought I might find you here. Ella turned to see James Harrington entering the darkened range, his expression knowing. Old habits, she admitted. Wei got to you today. It wasn't a question. Harrington had coached her long enough to read the subtle signs others would miss. Not in the way he intended, Ella replied, setting down the rifle. It just reminded me that I never properly faced that final failure. I walked away instead. Harrington approached, studying the target she had set up. You don't owe this sport a redemption story, Ella. Your legacy is secure. It's not about legacy, she said quietly. It's about completion. I've been teaching others to face pressure and failure, but I left my own unresolved. And now? Ella picked up the rifle again, settling it against her shoulder with the fluid grace that had once made her the most formidable competitor in the world. Now I understand that I'm not just preparing them for the games. I'm preparing myself for something too. Harrington smiled. That's why you're the right person for this job. You're still learning, still growing. That's what makes a true teacher. They've progressed faster than I expected, Ella said, changing the subject. But we're entering the critical phase now. Technical excellence under increasing pressure. And Victoria? How's your other project coming along? Ella lowered the rifle, her expression softening, finding her way. Discovering that teaching others can heal something in yourself. Something you learned long ago, Harrington observed. We all find our path eventually, Ella replied. Some through victory, others through defeat. Victoria needed both. After Harrington left, Ella remained at the range for another hour, not shooting but meditating, visualizing, reconnecting with the mental processes she had once perfected and now needed to model for her team. When she finally returned to her quarters, she felt a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. The next morning, She gathered her team before sunrise, leading them to an unfamiliar part of the base, an open field where 6 mats had been arranged in a circle. "Ma'am, where are the rifles?" Sergeant Miller asked, voicing the team's confusion. "Today we train without them," Ella explained. "Today is about understanding your body as the primary instrument. The rifle is merely an extension." For the next 2 hours, she guided them through a series of exercises drawn from various disciplines: yoga for stability, Tai Chi for fluid movement, martial arts for centered balance. The skepticism on their faces gradually transformed into concentration, as they began to recognize how these movements directly translated to shooting fundamentals. "Your body is not separate from your equipment," Ella explained as they moved through a particularly challenging sequence. "Most shooters think the rifle is the instrument. It's not. You are the instrument. The rifle is merely the voice through which your precision speaks." By the end of the session, the team had discovered new awareness of muscle groups they used unconsciously in shooting positions, new understanding of how breath connected to stability, new appreciation for the mind-body integration that underpinned elite performance. "Every morning will now begin this way," Ella announced as they gathered their gear. 30 minutes of body awareness before we touch a rifle. "Is this how you trained during your championship years?" Specialist Rodriguez asked. "Eventually. Yes," Ella admitted, "but I discovered it too late. I had years of success through pure technical skill, but it wasn't until I integrated these principles that I became truly unbeatable." She paused, making eye contact with each team member. "You have the advantage of starting with this foundation." As they walked back toward the main facility, Ella received a text from Victoria. "Crisis situation. Need advice urgently." Concerned, Ella stepped away to call her. "What's happening?" Victoria's voice was tense but controlled. "The advanced class has been invited to a demonstration competition next week. Top shooters from 3 academies. Director Reynolds wants our students to participate." "That sounds like an opportunity, not a crisis." "Ella, I don't know if they're ready," Victoria admitted. "What if they fail? What if I've failed them?" Ella heard the genuine concern in Victoria's voice, not for her own reputation, but for her students' confidence and development. It was perhaps the most significant evidence yet of Victoria's transformation. "Tell me honestly, how are their technical skills progressing?" "Their fundamentals are solid. Zoe especially has made remarkable improvements. But competition psychology is different from training psychology." "Yes, it is," Ella agreed. "And that's exactly why this opportunity matters. They need pressure. Testing, just like my team does." "But what if, Victoria?" Ella interrupted gently. "Do you remember what I told you during our first private session?" There was a moment of silence before Victoria answered. "That gentleness isn't weakness. It's the confidence to be vulnerable while maintaining your center." "Exactly. Your students don't need you to protect them from challenges. They need you to prepare them to face challenges with that centered gentleness." Ella could almost hear Victoria straightening on the other end of the line. "You're right. Of course you're right. Start today. Create pressure scenarios in training. Teach them recovery techniques when they miss. Show them that performance isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about responding to them effectively." "Thank you, Ella. You're welcome. And Victoria? Trust yourself. You've grown more than you realize." When Ella rejoined her team, they were already setting up for their technical training session, moving with the new body awareness they had just developed. She watched with satisfaction as Corporal Evans guided Specialist Rodriguez through a breathing technique he had particularly excelled at during their morning practice. They were becoming more than individual shooters. They were evolving into a true team, sharing strengths, supporting through weaknesses, unified by shared purpose. "Captain Morgan," Colonel Harris called, approaching with a serious expression. "We've received the official competition schedule and venue layout for the games. Ella reviewed the documents carefully. They've changed the lighting configuration from the original specifications. Harris nodded grimly. The Chinese delegation requested certain standardizations to the environment. The committee approved them yesterday. Ella wasn't surprised. It was exactly the kind of subtle advantage Wei would engineer, modifications that would favor the preparation his team had undergone, while potentially disrupting teams that had trained under different conditions. This changes nothing for U.S., Ella said confidently. Our entire approach is built on adaptation. You're not concerned? Ella handed back the documents with a calm smile. Colonel, they're still playing a game we stopped playing weeks ago. They're trying to control the environment. We're becoming environment-proof. The confidence in her voice wasn't bravado. It was earned through the transformation she had witnessed in her team. Their journey from skepticism to embodied mastery had exceeded even her ambitious expectations. One more thing, Harris added. Media Day is scheduled for next week. All teams are required to participate in interviews and demonstration shoots for the press. This was less welcome news. Media attention and potential distractions, pressure on individual team members, and increased scrutiny of their unconventional methods. We'll be ready, Ella assured the colonel, already formulating a preparation strategy. In fact, this presents a perfect pressure testing opportunity. That afternoon, Ella modified their training plan to incorporate simulated media presence. Team members asking questions during shooting sequences, cameras positioned in distracting locations, even bright lights mimicking photography flashes. Each new challenge was met with increasingly resilient performance. During a break, Sergeant Miller approached Ella privately. "Ma'am, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course, Sergeant." "Why did you really walk away at the peak of your career? The official story was that you'd accomplished all your goals, but—" Ella considered the question carefully. Her team deserved honesty if she expected the same from them. "I lost my purpose," she admitted. "I became so focused on winning that I forgot why I loved shooting in the first place. The perfect harmony of mind and body, the pure focus, the state of flow that transcends everything else." Miller nodded thoughtfully. "And now? Have you found it again?" Ella looked across the range where her team was reviewing their performance footage, completely absorbed in their development process. "I found something better. The joy of awakening that understanding in others." Later that evening, Ella received another update from Director Reynolds, a video of Victoria working with Zoe on competition psychology techniques. The transformation in their relationship was remarkable. The former antagonists now moved in synchrony. Victoria's instruction clear and supportive, Zoe's reception eager and respectful. "She's implementing everything you taught her, but making it her own," Reynolds commented in the accompanying message. "The students are responding because it's authentic, not an imitation of your style." Ella felt a surge of pride watching Victoria guide Zoe through a visualization exercise. This was perhaps her most important legacy, not the medals or records, but the transformation of lives through the principles she had discovered through both triumph and failure. As the video ended, Ella's phone buzzed with a news alert. Rematch set. Morgan versus Wei. The shooting world's greatest rivalry rekindled at military games. The headline was accompanied by a split-screen photo, an archive image of Ella at the height of her career, juxtaposed with a recent picture of Wei in military uniform. The media narrative was building, creating expectations and pressure that had nothing to do with her team's preparation. Ella closed the alert without reading. Further, the outside world would create whatever story it wanted. Her focus remained on the 6 dedicated shooters who had entrusted their competitive futures to her guidance, and on the transformed instructor who was carrying her teaching philosophy forward in her absence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new growth opportunities, new chances to demonstrate the power of gentle strength over forceful dominance. Ella Morgan, Once the world's most feared competitor, now its most respected teacher, was ready for all of it. Camera flashes exploded like silent lightning across the Fort Bennett press room. Journalists from 27 countries jostled for position, their questions overlapping in a cacophony of accents and languages. At the center of this media storm sat Ella Morgan, flanked by her 6-person team, her expression revealing nothing but calm focus. "Captain Morgan," called out a reporter from ESPN, "how does it feel to face Li Wei again after your controversial retirement?" Ella smiled slightly. "There was nothing controversial about completing my competitive goals and moving to teaching. As for facing Coach Wei, this competition isn't about 2 individuals. It's about 2 teams performing at their best under pressure." "But surely there's unfinished business between you," pressed a journalist from Global Sports Network. "Your last competition ended with equipment failure that cost you the gold." Many called it the greatest upset in shooting sports history. Sergeant Miller leaned forward, his protective instinct evident. "Captain Morgan has prepared us to perform regardless of circumstances or distractions. That resilience is what will determine the outcome." Ella nodded appreciatively at Miller's intervention. The team was implementing their media strategy perfectly, redirecting personal questions toward team preparation, emphasizing process over personalities, maintaining collective focus rather than individual spotlights. "Your training methods have raised eyebrows," noted a Chinese reporter. "Sources say you spend more time on meditation than actual shooting. How can such unorthodox approaches compete with China's proven excellence program?" "Excellence isn't created through conformity," Ella replied evenly. "Each team finds its path. We've chosen one that integrates mental resilience with technical precision." Before further questions could follow, the press officer announced, "The teams will now proceed to the demonstration range where each country will showcase their preparation." As they filed out, Corporal Evans whispered, "They're baiting us, trying to create drama for headlines." "Of course they are," Ella agreed quietly. "And we're denying them that narrative by staying centered. Well done, everyone." The demonstration range had been transformed into a theater of sorts, with tiered seating for journalists and special guests. Each team would perform a synchronized shooting demonstration, not for scoring, but for public relations. The Chinese team was scheduled first, followed by Germany, Russia, and finally the United States. Ella positioned her team in the observation area, where they could watch the other countries' demonstrations while remaining partially shielded from cameras. "Observe technique, but don't compare yourselves," she instructed. "Stay in your own process." The Chinese team entered with military precision, way at their center. Their demonstration was flawless, 6 shooters moving in perfect unison, their shots creating identical patterns on their targets. The crowd murmured appreciatively at the display of technical excellence. Wei made eye contact with Ella as his team exited, the barest hint of a challenging smile crossing his face. She acknowledged him with a respectful nod, giving nothing more. The German and Russian teams followed with similarly impressive displays, though each with their distinct national style: German efficiency, Russian power. Then it was time for the American team to take position. As they stepped onto the range, Ella gathered them for one final instruction. "Forget the audience. Forget the cameras. This is just another training day. Trust your process." The team nodded in unison, then moved to their positions. What followed wasn't the mechanical precision of the Chinese demonstration, but something altogether different. The American team moved with fluid awareness, their breathing synchronized not by drill, but by shared focus. When they fired, it wasn't in perfect unison but in perfect sequence, a cascading rhythm that demonstrated individual excellence within team cohesion. When they finished, the audience response was different from the polite appreciation shown to other teams. There was a moment of surprised silence, followed by spontaneous applause. They had witnessed something unexpected, not a demonstration of conformity, but a revelation of harmonized individuality. As they exited the range, Colonel Harris met them with evident satisfaction. "Impressive performance. You've given them something to think about." "More importantly," Ella replied, "the team performed their process regardless of audience pressure. That was the real test today." Back in their private training facility, Ella gathered the team for debriefing. "You were each tested differently. Out there, some by questions about your readiness, others by the technical excellence of our competitors. How did it feel?" Specialist Rodriguez spoke first. "6 weeks ago, I would have been intimidated by the Chinese team's precision. Today I saw it differently, impressive but rigid. No adaptability." "Exactly," Ella nodded. "What else?" "The media questions were designed to create doubt," Sergeant Miller observed, "but they had the opposite effect. They reinforced the confidence we've built in our approach." Ella smiled, pleased with their insights. "This is the final phase of our preparation. External pressure will continue to increase as we approach the games. The difference between good teams and great ones is how they respond to that pressure, either by tightening up and losing flexibility, or by settling deeper into their training and gaining clarity." She paused, making eye contact with each team member. "Today you demonstrated which path you're taking. I couldn't be prouder." As the team dispersed for their recovery routines, Ella checked her phone to find a message. From Victoria, "First competition complete. Need to speak with you." Concerned by the terse message, Ella stepped outside to call her. "How did it go?" Victoria's voice was strained. "We placed 3rd overall. Zoe took individual silver in her category. That's excellent for their first competitive experience," Ella replied, confused by Victoria's tone. "What's troubling you?" "I failed them in the final preparation," Victoria admitted. "2 of our shooters completely lost focus during the team event when the crowd noise increased. I should have prepared them better for distractions." Ella heard the genuine anguish in Victoria's voice, not for her own reputation, but for her students' experience. "Victoria, listen carefully. There's a difference between failure and incomplete development. Your students aren't finished products. They're works in progress, just as you are." "But I should have." "Every coach feels this way after competitions," Ella interrupted gently. "The question isn't whether you prepared them perfectly. It's how you helped them process and grow from the experience." There was a moment of silence before Victoria asked, "What would you do?" "First, celebrate what went well, Zoe's silver, the overall placement. Acknowledge the achievement. Then, use the distraction issue as a focused development opportunity. Create training scenarios that specifically address crowd noise adaptation. Turn the challenge into a growth path." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.